But I remember always hearing, you can't have your cake and eating it too. I mean, I probably heard that like once a day because I didn't understand why I couldn't make a lot of money and be a mom, right? It was always like I had to choose between the two. And so my journals really became great because they never told me no. They never told me that I needed to choose. And even to this day, I keep one with me, literally in my purse, because it's validation that the desires that I have, those big dreams that I think are just out of this world, they're doable.
Welcome to the I Heart My Life show, Amber. Thank you for being here. I know we're going to have a really open and honest conversation about you and the work that you do and your backstory. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So let's take it back. I always like to talk about the story behind the success. And I have the privilege of working with you privately. You're one of my incredible rock star clients. So I know a lot about your story at this point. And you've heard me say on many of our coaching sessions, oh my gosh, this needs to be a book. You need to speak on stage. You need to share this message. And so I'm thrilled that you're here finally sharing this message and sharing your journey because it is truly so, so powerful. So let's take the listeners back to a little bit about your childhood. In particular, I'd love for you to share that period of time between, being born and 4 years old and what that was like for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I just thank you for this platform. I call this season of my life Finding My Voice. And that is pivotal for me because, as you know, I did not grow up in the best circumstances. Well, I wasn't born in the best circumstances. Let me say that. And I actually was severely abused earlier on in my childhood, which caused me to have a speech delay until I was about 4. My parents wanted to put me in speech. I just was not speaking. I would communicate, but I would never speak. I would point and, things like that, but I would never speak until I was about 4. And so when I started to speak, I was speaking sentences. And I remember my aunt, she tells me, she says, Amber, we knew then something was inside of you. You just have this message you needed to get out into the world. She said, because even though you didn't speak until you were 4, when you did begin speaking, you were speaking full-fledged sentences. And, you were like telling us and recounting, things that we didn't know you knew. So from there, I just began to just question everything, question the world around me. And I just remember just having this childlike curiosity that I'm sure we'll get to later on, but has proven to be correct. Even as a toddler, even as a young girl, my desires, my thoughts, I'm finding out through coaching with you that, as I said on our coaching call a couple of weeks ago, I've been right this whole time.
Yeah. So, so beautiful. Yeah. We're definitely going to come to that because that's huge. So what do you think it was during that period of time when you did start to speak, verbally speak? What was it that shifted? I'm not sure if you can remember, at the age of 4, did anyone tell you, was it just one day you woke up and started talking, or what was that experience?
I remember it like it was yesterday. I was actually put in a very, bad situation for a child. I was seeing some things that I was not supposed to be seeing. And I remember calling my grandfather. Back then, that was when we had landlines. And, I remember my aunt, she always repeated our phone number. So I remember calling him and crying and saying, my mommy's in trouble. Please come. And I will never forget that because literally from that phone call, he got on a plane. He was living in Florida at the time, and he came to live with us. So at 4, my grandfather pretty much became my surrogate father. So
Wow.
yeah, that I will never forget that conversation. Just remembering the terror and the fear at 4, but having the wherewithal to know, okay, something's wrong. I need to call someone, and that was the only number that I knew by heart.
Wow. And that was the first time you spoke?
Yes. Well, the first time I remember speaking,
Yeah.
yes, I called my grandfather
Oh my
and I
goodness.
was crying and I was just telling him, I guess he was able to decipher that something was wrong.
Yeah. And he came. Wow.
Yeah.
So take us back to the period after that. So you're able to speak now, you're communicating, you have your grandfather in your corner. What was life like for you?
Oh, I remember that being some of my fondest memories. My grandfather, I still consider him to be my Superman. He came in at a very tumultuous time in me and my mom's life. My mom had me very young, so she was busy just wanting to live that young life, you know? So my grandfather was the one who gave me stability. When my grandpa moved in, I finally got a bed. Most people don't know that I grew up living, well, I was raised sleeping on the floor. I didn't know children had beds. I thought that's what rich people had. So when grandpa came, he gave us that stability and he championed my curiosity. I remember just always asking questions, and he took joy in answering them. He made me feel very secure and very loved, very, very loved. From there, I do remember sometimes where that wasn't always the case. You know, I didn't always feel supported, but I always knew that my grandfather had my back. In some ways, I consider myself my grandfather's daughter because he shaped so much of who I am today.
Mm, so
Yeah.
beautiful. And as you became, as you grew up, as you became a teenager and started to go through education and all of that, what were your dreams? What was it that you wanted to end up doing?
Oh, so um, I've always wanted to be a businesswoman. I have to find that picture. But as much as I love my grandfather for giving me that security and just championing my curiosity, I do remember one time being scolded by my mom. She was saying that, you know, you're asking too many questions, you know, you talk too much. And I'll never forget, Emily, she gave me a notebook and a pen. And that, what I didn't know, that was a very pivotal moment in my life as well, because I began to doodle and I began to write. And so earlier on, my aunt still has the photo. I drew myself as a stick figure, and I'm holding like this box, which now I know it was a briefcase. And in the sky, I drew a plane, and I wrote, I want to be a businesswoman. Of course, it was spelled horribly. But even then, at say maybe 5 or 6, I knew that I wanted to be a businesswoman. I wanted to be um, just one that really moved the needle. And not just what I'm learning now through coaching with you, not just in business, but also in life. You know, from there, I've also wanted to be a writer because writing was just kind of thrust upon me. Um, and funny enough, I really wanted to be a meteorologist at one point.
Love it.
I wanted so badly to be on the news and telling people what to wear for the day, um, helping them prepare. Um, so yeah, it's funny because in some ways my life has kind of shaped out to be that way
Yeah.
outside of the meteorologist.
Right, right. Maybe you tell your kids what to wear.
Right.
So one of the pieces I want to pull out from there is this idea of, the journal. And in one of our sessions together, we were talking about, or you just mentioned, you always have a journal. And one of the reasons why that you've come to realize is because it never could basically talk back. It could never say that you were wrong or that you couldn't do it or put doubts in your mind. With
Mhm.
that journal, you were always right. You were always validated. Your thoughts were true. Can you talk more about that and how important that was for you growing up and obviously today as well?
Absolutely. So I grew up hearing, because I was such an inquisitive child, I grew up hearing no. No was literally almost like second nature for my mom, for the people around me, outside of my grandfather. But I remember always hearing, you can't have your cake and eating it too. I mean, I probably heard that like once a day because I didn't understand why I couldn't make a lot of money and be a mom, right? It was always like I had to choose between the two. And so my journals really became great because they never told me no. They never told me that I needed to choose. And even to this day, I keep one with me, literally in my purse, because it's validation that the desires that I have, those big dreams that I think are just out of this world, they're doable. You know, that's literally my future self telling me or coming back into my present reality and saying, hey, I've already lived it. You can do it. Like, let me really champion you and give you that strength because conditioning wise, I was never conditioned to believe that I could have both. It was one or the other. It was you were um, from a money aspect, you were poor, but you were virtuous, or you were rich and you were greedy. And I just never understood why I couldn't be both, you know? So
Yeah, and
I
you've mentioned to me that phrase, "Have your cake and eat it too." You couldn't comprehend as a child, why would I not be able to have this cake and also eat it? That makes
that's right.
absolutely no sense.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because when I was a teenager, I took cake decorating classes because I was just fascinated by this notion that, wait, I'm baking this cake and I'm going to eat it in reality. So why can't I do that in life? You know? So yes, absolutely. That was one of the pivotal cruxes that I really had to work through. And your coaching has totally helped me with that, helping me take a stand for the and, as you say.
Yeah, that was a phrase that came to me through Gina DeVee back in 2014 when I was in one of her programs. And she was big on that, take a stand for the and. And it's definitely been something that's been woven into our coaching in a big way. So let's talk about that with people, because I know one of the big things for you, of course, like we talked about, is following your dreams and being able to be a mom and be successful. You have a really successful career. You're building a business. You're a mom of, 3 kids under what, 4?
Or,
At the time
yeah.
that we're recording this. So that's a lot. So you've definitely taken a stand for the end. And one
Mhm.
of the other components to this that I know was always at the forefront of your mind was race. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love talking about this because it's truly in homage to my grandfather. So my grandfather was biracial, and I grew up in the South, which has very strong racial undertones. And I just remember my grandfather never ever telling me to choose one or the other. He loved Barbara Streisand and he loved, traditional R&B music. But I do remember there being undertones around which one was better, right? Which one was right, so to speak. And so that created a dichotomy within me because I didn't know which one to choose, right? I always felt like I was never fully Black, but I wasn't white either, And so in so many points in my life, I realized that I had to take a stand for one or the other. And whenever I did, I never felt totally aligned, right? I remember mentioning in one of our coaching calls that for me, and this is my truth, I do remember very heavy racial undertones in terms of being a victim because I was Black. I was constantly reminded that, hey, you're a Black woman and we don't do this or we don't have this because we're Black. And I'll never forget one day, I was probably 6 or 7, my grandfather sat me down because I asked him, I said, Grandpa, they're saying this but I don't understand why, again, right, just my curiosity. And he said, Amber, the way I see it, you can do one of two things. You can see being Black as your Achilles heel and go through your life as a victim, or you can see it as your superpower. He said, and whichever one you choose today, it's going to shape the rest of your life. And I'll never forget that. I still have that notebook, oddly enough, of that day. That was back in 2000, right at 2000. So I was probably 10 at that point. And I remember saying, I don't have to choose. And of course, it helped to have the artist Michael Jackson. He had Black or White. And that literally, Emily, became my anthem. I would sing that all the time. I would dance to it because it was like, it doesn't matter. Even though my family wanted me to choose one or the other, I had cousins who constantly, and to this day, some of them still call me white girl, or a valley girl. Some of them don't really have a relationship with me because I've taken a stand for the and I've had to become okay with not fitting into a box, not fitting into a mold, not being a monolith, but really just being myself.
Mm. And why do you think
Mhm.
it's so important? And it's not just your family, we see this in other examples. Why do you think it's so important for people to have you pick one or the other?
I think it's important for them because it gives them a way out. If I live my life thinking that I'm a victim, it's easy for me to categorize anything bad in my life being because I am that victim, right?
Mm.
It takes away some of the personal responsibility. And then it always gives me a big bad monster that, whether I can quantify it or not, it's always that thing that I can blame it on. And no one will question me for it because, of course, it's there. It must be real.
And how have you wrestled with that? The fact that, some of your family, you don't have a relationship with them because you're not Black enough. You're not, what they expect you to be. How have you been able to handle that?
It, if I'm being completely honest, it has been a journey. And it still is a journey. Now that I am a mom, it hurts because I do have some family that they don't have a relationship with me. So by nature, they don't have a relationship with my children. But it's been an act of resilience. And it kind of goes back to my journals always being my besties. I've been able to have some candid conversations, but it rears its ugly head sometimes because I am successful. So for a lot of my family, they don't understand like how I've been able to do it, or it must be because she acts like this or because she talks like this, right? And it's been an uphill battle. I will say I do have some aunts who are finally realizing, okay, it's the way that Amber sees the world that has really given her credence to have the success that she has. It's the steps that she's taken. Um, but it definitely has been an uphill battle, and I still have a lot of ways to go. I would say more so with my not my millennial cousins, but the younger generation, because they grew up in such a more polarized time. It's really hard for me to cut through that noise and let them see that, hey, it doesn't matter how you look, like it matters who you are. Success is an inside job. So we're still working on that.
Yeah. Thank you for your transparency. And although you mentioned, we've covered a lot of this during our coaching sessions, I said to you previously that you have an innate positive mindset. And that's putting it lightly. Like the way you see the world as you describe it is very unique and it's very abundant. And it feels to me that that's your natural way of being. Because I have some clients that come in and it's tough to get to that place. And it's not the mindset that maybe they were taught it when they were growing up, but it's not their natural way of thinking at this point. But I feel like for you, there is a natural element of abundance to the way that you think and the way that you see the world. And there's also a naturalness to, like you said, your curiosity, but also your relentlessness and refusal to take no for an answer. So I'm curious to know, where does that come from?
Ooh, how heavy can we get, Emily?
We can go there.
Oh no, that comes from in the womb. So my mother and father were together as teenagers, and my mother was, pregnant, but her menstrual cycles were not regular. So by the time she found out that she was pregnant with me, she was 6 months pregnant. She said, Amber, I had no idea, like, I wasn't looking for my cycle because it was so infrequent. And she said, and Amber, my first immediate thought was to have an abortion. She actually went to the clinic to terminate the pregnancy, but she was too far along. And so because of that, she couldn't, and she didn't put me up for adoption. She had a great tribe. But I think that resiliency comes from innately kind of knowing that I wasn't really wanted. And so feeling like I needed to prove myself, and in every turn of my life, I'm realizing that I won't say I was a mistake, but I was definitely not planned, right? And so because of that, and just being, very, very cognizant of the fact that some women are not, and I get that, but being the product of it, I have a very different, way of seeing it. And I think that's really what has birthed this natural resiliency, because I see myself as being a survivor. I think every single day that there was a chance where I couldn't be, or I wouldn't be here, and so because I see my life through that lens, it gives me almost a burden to make my life mean something. And even as a child, because I was innately aware that I was not wanted, it created in me a longing to be accepted, um, a craving, almost an obsession, to make people feel better, to make people feel my love and my warmth, almost to just prove that I deserve to exist. And so because I've lived my life in that way, I think I've naturally just built this, it's not that bad.
Mm.
You know, we can always figure it out. We can always champion a solution. But I think that's where it comes from. Just understanding that I didn't have to be here. And since I am here, I have to make my life mean something.
Oh, that's so amazing. And thank you for being so vulnerable with that. That always pulls at my heartstrings, thinking about, obviously, you knowing as a child that initially you weren't planned or wanted. I can't imagine growing up knowing that and
Mhm.
coming out on the other side as strong as you are. And at the same time, I know you've done a lot of work around this, especially with having your own daughter. What did you do to process that, to prepare
Mhm.
yourself for motherhood of your daughter?
Yeah, so I'm loving this question, Emily, because when I had my sons, I have three. My daughter is my third. When I had my sons, it didn't rear, so it didn't come up for me as much. But when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, it definitely sent me down a spiral. So I got some therapy, and journaling became my best friend as well. And I really found that talking about it, because up until when I became pregnant with my daughter, no one really understood how I was really suffering in silence. My journals knew, but they would never tell anyone. And so what I really had to do was come face to face with those demons, so to speak, of not feeling loved, not feeling wanted, because what I realized I was doing in more ways than not, anyone who did love me, I saw that as they did it only because they had to, right? They did it out of obligation. I mean, even with my children, I was thinking, well, you have to love me. I'm your mom, So really doing the inner work of, sorry, Emily, doing the inner work to see that I was worthy of love, and not out of obligation, but out of pureness of who I was, as a woman, as a being, as a human, that I was worthy of love. I was worthy of kindness, because growing up, I just never felt worthy enough of that.
Mm. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot.
Mhm.
It's so interesting what babies bring up for us, and the opportunities that they bring for us to heal and to step into our true self. And I know one of the things that you've uncovered recently is that you were right all along about so much. And it's really interesting because so many of the conversations I'm having lately are about returning to who you really are and your true self. And tapping into that inner child who had such a knowing and such a curiosity and such a vibrancy that a lot of us lose as adults. So, what are the things that you knew all along that you were right about?
Oh my goodness. I've been right all along that you can be a mom and you can make a lot of money. I've been right along, Emily, something that I never talk about, um, was my longing to be a mom of three, specifically two boys and a girl at the end. So my mom had three, she had two girls and the boy at the end, and I wanted to do the opposite of her. And so when I was in high school, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be a wife, I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to help a lot of people. And when I was 25, I go in for a routine checkup and I was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I also had endometriosis. And so there, my doctor, I'll never forget, she told me, she said, Amber, you will struggle to conceive. And then if you conceive, because you have a very sensitive cervix, you're going to go into labor prematurely. And, and I totally understood where she was coming from. She wanted to level set. And I remember thinking, I think this was just my resiliency saying, that's okay. I'm still going to be a mom of three. And today I'm a mom of three, two boys and my girl at the end, the exact way that I wanted it, So I truly manifested that outside of even medical odds. I remember getting pregnant with my first son and being high risk, right? They were thinking that I wouldn't be able to carry him to term. And I've carried all three of my babies to term.
Wow.
So even that is amazing to me when I sit back and think of my story of being right all along, Um, Another area I would say where I've been right all along is that my dreams, my desires, and speaking. I love to speak now, which is very funny because I didn't speak for the first 4 years of my life. And my first time speaking was, for something not so great. But I've literally been able to coach really young women in college. I'm sorry, that's what I do in my 9 to 5. I coach them into jobs and careers in technology. But I've been able to do that, and I'm thinking to myself, this should not be my life at all. I remember moving to Virginia when, I was born and raised in South Carolina. And this was another thing. It was almost like this is just what you do. You get a job at the call center, and I'm not speaking bad about anyone else, but I followed my family's path, and I just remember thinking this is not for me. I had my degree, I got the call center job like everyone else, and I remember thinking this isn't it. And so I set my sights on somewhere outside of the state because I knew I needed to be almost away from my conditioning, from my circle. And this is why I resonate so much with your move to London. It's like you just knew that there was something more for you, right? And I remember going to not London. I remember going to Virginia. I moved to Virginia, and then no one supported me other than my grandfather. My grandfather was the only one that said you can do it. And because I took a stand for the and, that really allowed me to create a career for myself outside of the call center, a professional career. And I just look back at so many parts of my life, so many journal entries where I've been right all along, that you get to have your cake and eat it too. Today, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a professional woman with a great career, and I'm building an amazing brand, an amazing company.
Oh,
So, yeah.
full body goosebumps. So good. So I'm sure everyone listening is like, yeah, this woman needs to write a book. So let's talk about that last piece, because you and I have a lot of conversations about the dichotomy between corporate life and starting a business, and how can you do both. And oftentimes when you do have something stable and it's lucrative and you're doing really well, it's like that business and that dream, it becomes optional. Whereas those of us like myself who've never been in that space, I've always been an entrepreneur. It's like, we got to make this work because there's no fallback plan. And so there's that level of motivation that might be a little bit different compared to what you've experienced. So can you talk about that for anyone listening? Because I know there are a lot of people who want to start something but haven't yet, and they might be in a similar position where they don't actually have to, but they feel something calling them.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question because for the longest, I felt like I've been stuck between my job and my dream, right? And to your point, because the job is so stable, it almost makes the dream optional. And so, what you've really been helping me with is really connecting with the why, right? What is the why greater than the money, greater than the stability? What is it? And for me, it's the freedom and it's the fulfillment because I've just learned that no career is going to fulfill me quite like my calling and my purpose, which is like coaching young women into their next level. And I think that's really what has helped me really stay grounded in the mission is that fulfillment aspect of it. I think so often, particularly women with careers, we're looking for that dream job, right? We're looking for who do we connect with? What organization do we partner with? Who do we connect with on LinkedIn? Things like that. And really coaching with you has helped me realize that you don't really land a dream job, you kind of create it, right? And so that's what I'm in the stages of doing is creating that thing that really marries the financial aspect of it and also that fulfillment, that purpose, that alignment as well.
And it's so interesting to think about you, just starting this brand, because I don't see that, because you've essentially been doing this work inside of your job for many years, and you've been doing this work personally for many years. And so I think that's what a lot of people also think. They think, well, I'm going to be starting over. I'm starting at the beginning. And I don't think that's true, because you're taking everything from the past decade and bringing it into the work that you're doing. And you've mentioned to me many times that there have been people within your role who were like, Amber, you need to do more speaking. You need to be more like, you need to coach, you need to start this brand, and everyone can see it. And, it just takes, like you said, connecting to that why and connecting to that deeper meaning. especially for people where the financial gain is not necessarily, the most important piece of the puzzle, whereas it is when people are, that they don't have any sort of fallback plan, like I was saying. So that connection is so, so important. But I just want to speak to that because there's so many people who think that they are like a complete newbie, but that's normally not the case at all.
Absolutely not. And sometimes I do think, as you said, it takes other people's really championing our brilliance because we're so close to it. I often say it's hard to see the picture when you're inside of the frame, right? So because we're doing it every day, day in and day out, we don't see the brilliance in what we're doing. And to your point, I've been coaching college seniors for years on how to land, their roles in cybersecurity and technology. I've been a project manager. And so for the longest, I thought, even in building my brand, I thought that I had to do something completely outside of what I was doing in my 9 to 5. I've tried health coaching, I've tried relationship coaching, and none of those really panned out. And now that I'm really focusing on what I'm doing in my 9 to 5, does it come easy to me? Because I don't feel like I constantly have to code switch, right? I'm not choosing between professional Amber and coaching Amber. I'm doing what I'm naturally doing in my 9 to 5 just for me, just for my brand. And so I would definitely just encourage anyone who is in corporate and who really has that longing of doing that something big. I always say that what you're getting paid for in your 9 to 5, you're already good at. Someone's already paying you, 50K or more a year to do that job. Why not just stop there? Just start.
Yeah.
And I know that Les Brown says it's the start that stops most people. And
Mm.
for me, that has been something that has really gotten in my way, just that imposter syndrome, even fear around my coworkers finding me out. And because of those things, I kept myself stuck. I kept myself limited into this box. But now that I've gotten started, it feels so aligned. Creating content, promoting, all of it feels true to me because I think now that I am really building a brand around myself, right? It's so much easier to do something that you're already doing, but for yourself. Um, and that's what I would absolutely say for anyone in corporate who's looking to kind of step outside of the corporate niche. Just start with where you are and build something around that.
And I know you said to me the other day, you tell your clients to be the content. And I thought that was so brilliant because, again, that's another stumbling block for people. Well, how do I create content? How am I going to be constantly creative? All the question marks around marketing. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I came into coaching thinking that there was one way to do it. And so most of the women in my niche, they didn't have lives like me. So I felt like I couldn't be completely myself. But now that I'm sharing the fact that I'm a mom and I work 9 to 5, sometimes I post Instagram stories, literally working in my office, and it connects because most people, the people that I'm called to connect with, it's their reality as well. So it's not more so thinking about the content. It's filming myself when I'm in dance class and then putting text around that. And it's really helped me see that I'm not choosing a niche anymore. Like I am the niche, right? Some people will be connected to me because they're corporate. Some people will be connected because they love dance or because they're moms. And so just really bringing my full self to my brand, it makes content really effortless because I'm no longer thinking about it. I'm just being it.
Yeah. And you always come across to me as somebody who is so confident and so sure of herself. Tell me, have you always been like that? Or is that something that's been generated? And if so, for those listening who need to get some confidence, how did you do that?
Yeah, so it's definitely been generated. And thank you so much for that great compliment. Um, I would say for me, it's always been a mind over matter type of thing. In more ways than one, I've realized that wherever my mind goes, my energy kind of flows. So every morning, actually, there's an exercise that I do where I kind of almost have a pep rally with myself. And I tell myself that, I can get my to do list done, that I can have great meetings, I can have great client calls. And so I'm really telling myself that before anything has the opportunity to tell me otherwise, I'm telling myself that I am great, I'm magnificent, almost doing my affirmations, right? And then from there, it's almost like my days become self-fulfilling prophecies because I'm just naturally going to move in that direction of success. I'm naturally going to move in that direction of confidence. And so that's what I would recommend any and everyone to do, is to hype yourself up. I think sometimes we don't do that enough. We don't take in our own brilliance and really congratulate ourselves for everything that we're doing on the day-to-day basis. And so me doing that has really, really been monumental for me. I show up differently for my husband, my children, my team at work, and even my clients.
Mm,
Um, so yeah.
thank you. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about, well, let me back up. Let me paint the picture a little bit. So a few months ago, I reached out to you saying I had a few spots available for private coaching. And your response was so amazing. You said that you would put me on your vision board and our work together on your vision board. I think it was last November or something.
Mhm.
And you were so excited about this opportunity. So first, can you tell people a little bit about that? Like, what was it that made you put this on your vision board? Is that a practice that you often do? Do you see that working in your life? I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, so I have to go back to 2019. Um, I was nursing my son, and your ad found me for iHeart Coaching. So I'm not new to the Emily Williams brand, but I will never forget finding your ad, or your ad finding me, as I say, and thinking, oh my goodness, she gets me. And that was the first time ever that I've connected with someone so genuinely. From your branding down to your copy, everything about the Emily Williams and the iHeart Coaching brand was just everything to me, right? So I went through iHeart Coaching, which was such an amazing experience. And so since then, I've just really followed your journey. And I still have it in my phone. It was November 22nd, 2022. Talk about angel numbers,
Wow.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have an Apple Notes in my phone, and it just says a list of my desires. So what I typically do at the end of the year, before I do my vision boards, I list out my desire. And then from there, I will create my vision board, literally. So it would have been, for you, it would have literally been a picture of you on my vision board. And I literally wrote down, I really want to be coached by Emily, and I want to meet her in 2023, which for me, that was big because you were pregnant, you were expecting, and I didn't know what your coaching practice was going to look like after you had the baby. So for me, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to put it on there because that's truly my desire. And so when you reached out to me, I literally wanted to just cry because it was really like the universe proving that I've been right this whole time, right? It goes back to that my desires are valid, and not only valid, that they can truly come into fruition. It was that synchronicity, as people say, and I had never really experienced it as I had in that moment when you messaged me.
Yeah, so good. And the reason I wanted you to share that, obviously, people love to hear about your experience and our work together, and we can talk more about that in a second. But I want people to understand like how possible this really is and how easy it is to bring what you want to create into your life. Amber literally wrote down her list of her desires. Super easy, super fun. A lot of people avoid that because they're worried about being disappointed. What am I going to do if this doesn't actually happen? Then putting together a visual to focus on, like a vision board or something like that, or a Pinterest board, and continuing to hold the faith and believe, even if it seems crazy because the person you want to work with or whatever the scenario isn't even, available at the moment, but continuing to believe and put one foot in front of the other. And I'm not sure what your practice was in terms of how much you looked at that or how much you focused on it, but I actually don't think you need to be looking at it every single day. In fact, you can just develop the belief and then just kind of let it go. I know a lot of people have manifested dream houses, and then years later, they're like, oh my gosh, this was the exact house on my vision board. And they kind of forgot, so to speak. But I actually think that sometimes that's healthy, because when you aren't so obsessed with it, like there's a level of calm and assuredness that this could happen versus I need to try and force this to happen by looking at it every single day. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. Well said. And to your point, for that desire to work with you, I kind of did put that off because I didn't know what your books would be looking like. So I was thinking more so like the last half of this year, maybe. So absolutely putting it out there and just letting it come to you. Mhm.
Yeah, so beautiful. And then the other piece of this that I want to highlight is when you signed up with me, you said I was so excited to transfer you this money, like something along those lines. And I'm sharing this
Yeah.
again because for the people listening who want to attract their dream clients, I want them to remember that there are those people out there in the world, because I think so often we feel like we're taking money from people or we can't charge for helping people, and there's so many just negative thoughts around sales in general, especially people who are just getting into entrepreneurship. But there are those people out there who really want to work with you and who are saving up and who will be so excited to make that payment. And everyone deserves to have that experience. And it can be challenging in the beginning because you're just kind of taking whatever you can get. But I wanted to share that because I think it's so refreshing. And obviously, I really appreciated you telling me that. It was music to my ears.
Yes. No, it was literally so exciting for me. I remember the day, like you sent over the information, I canceled my meeting and I drove to the bank, like right then and there. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my goodness, my desire. And you told me that there were people who had me on their vision board. I think on one of our
Yeah.
first coaching sessions, and that moment came full circle for me a few weeks ago. I was speaking at an event and someone came up to me crying and she said, I'm your people. Like, please coach me. And I remember like tearing up in that moment because it was like, someone feels about me how I feel about Emily.
Oh.
And that was literally, I'm gonna get choked up. That was amazing because the work that you do, Emily, in the lives of women and men every day, it cannot ever be overstated, right? And so to have that type of impact on someone else that you've had on me, it was just beautiful. And it really shows the ripple effect of coaching.
For sure. Yeah. And there are people who right now admire you who might not have the guts to speak up or reach out this second. And I think that's also something we need to remember, because so often it feels like things aren't happening and where are the clients, and is what I'm doing, does it even matter? Am I making an impact? Should I keep sharing on social media? But you never know who's putting you on your vision board literally right now.
Yes, so good.
And for those people who have the vision boards, remember, you can fast track it. You don't need to wait 6 months, a year, 10 years. Like, let's really compress the timeline, and getting the support that you need often does that. So,
Absolutely.
before we close off, can you share a little bit more about the results that you've experienced in our coaching container thus far?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So, in a short word, life changing. um, More than anything, more than the strategy, um, more than the amazing conversations that we have, I have discovered my voice again. And I'm not going to cry, but because I was conditioned at such an early age that my voice didn't matter or I talked too much, um, you've helped me discover my voice, and to not just discover it, but to stand in it. And I think that's really, really critical because some people, when we find our voice, we tend to run from it, right? It can be very heavy. So in standing in my voice and standing in my truth, I've been able to create content effortlessly, which is attracting my ideal clients. It's attracting the opportunities. I can't tell you how many times people have reached out to me in just a few short weeks. And well, I have been telling you, for podcast opportunities, for live speaking events, and even professionally. I had literally have coworkers coming up to me saying, Amber, like, why don't you do this for yourself? And little do they know I am. And I would say that it's been a full on life changing experience. I'm having much more thoughtful and candid conversations with my husband around the support that I need. I'm talking more openly about my dreams and my desires, which would never happen up until really our coaching. Most of my desires have lived in my iPhone or in my journal. And so now I'm able to own that voice and say, hey, what are we going to do when? Right? Not if. I've really started to change my language around my desires. They're no longer an if, they're a when. I'm calling them into my reality now. Um, so, yeah, I think in a short word, just life changing, it's been everything that I thought it would be and more.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Amber. It's been a pleasure to work with you, for sure.
Mhm.
So, before we get to the final question, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's Amber Black Coaching. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, more active on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn if you are someone that's corporate. I am on LinkedIn as just Amber Black. But yeah, also my website is amberblackcoaching.com.
Beautiful. So, what is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams and far exceeds their expectations?
That's such a great question. I would say one way would be to completely own who you are. I think that more often than not, we're conditioned to be a monolith and to conform. But the brilliance is you taking up all of the space and being much too much, as my grandfather would say. He'd say, you know, you're much too much. And so owning that you get to be all of the things, right? You get to really have it all. And I think that really comes from you making the decision to take up the space, to own who you are, and to truly pursue everything that you desire. One thing that you've helped me realize is that my desires aren't so far away. I think in a coaching call, I said, you know, I've been thinking that I'm in North Carolina, and I've been thinking that my desires were in California, like they were so far out, right? And you've helped me realize that no, they're almost in like Virginia, you know? So just really calling them in, but it all starts with that decision to really pursue it and make it a non-negotiable.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Well, I feel honored to know you and to be able to connect with you weekly and be a part of your mission. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably here with all of us and for connecting and just for being an example of what's possible. So excited for what's to come.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Emily.
I love working with driven women to help them reach their next level of success and to become more of who they were designed and destined to be. So if you are looking for support in my private coaching practice, in business, life, with your money, your mindset, your health, your relationships, all of the above, go to emilywilliams.com/services to learn more and book a complimentary call with me to see what program might be the right fit. I'd love to work with you.